Disappointment in professional sports usually comes from underdogs failing to take the next step. Yet in the NBA, the biggest letdowns often arrive wearing star-studded jerseys and carrying championship-sized hopes. Two teams have found themselves at the center of basketball's swirling rumor mill for all the wrong reasons: the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers. They are each stacked with recognized talent and led by executives willing to make aggressive moves. But the reality on the hardwood has been alarmingly underwhelming. Fans of these franchises once dreamed of confetti showers in June. They've instead been served a sobering lesson on how quickly hype can devolve into a cautionary tale. The sense of disillusionment surrounding these two rosters transcends typical sports chatter. On paper, both squads appear capable of bulldozing their conferences. The Suns turned heads by hauling in Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal to complement Devin Booker, three offensive juggernauts who, in theory, should wreak havoc across the league. Meanwhile, the 76ers believed they had finally transcended years of rebuilding. After the process yielded Joel Embiid and an array of draft picks, the franchise swung for the fences by adding James Harden and adopting a championship-or-bust mentality. But as we approach the heat of another NBA campaign, glaring cracks have shattered each team's polished exterior. Their woes aren't identical, yet there are enough parallels to make observers question whether high-profile rosters inevitably invite chaos. Both groups operate under overwhelming pressure to satisfy impatient fanbases. Both face questions about culture and internal harmony, and both must deal with complicated financial constraints that could strangle their flexibility for years. So how did we reach this point, and why is the outlook so bleak for two franchises that should theoretically be perched atop the league standings? In this deep dive, we'll explore the labyrinth of decisions, mistakes, star signings, and unfulfilled promises that have turned the Suns and Sixers into the NBA's most baffling enigmas. We'll look at the precarious nature of assembling multiple alpha personalities in an era where depth and versatility often win championships. We'll also highlight the swirling rumors that suggest big trades might be around the corner, moves that could alter the fate of the league. Strap in for a journey through dashed hopes, locker room whispers, and the looming possibility that these two once fearsome contenders might soon wave the white flag on their grand plans. Both the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers share a defining trait. Each franchise soared into recent seasons with heady optimism. The Suns, spurred by a surprise finals run in 2021, appeared on the cusp of sustained success. With Devin Booker blossoming into a lethal scorer and Chris Paul orchestrating the offense like a maestro, it seemed like they'd found a winning formula. As for the 76ers, years of being intentionally dreadful in the name of the process had finally borne fruit. Joel Embiid morphed from a frequently injured curiosity into a league MVP candidate, while Ben Simmons, at one point, gave them a dynamic, if flawed, defensive juggernaut at the point guard position. At their heights, these two squads offered fans a vision of unstoppable prowess. Phoenix smothered opponents with offensive precision. Philadelphia leveraged Embiid's dominance to bully teams inside. But the seeds of discontent were already planted long before the disappointment became unavoidable. The Suns' heartbreak in the 2021 finals foreshadowed how thin their margin for error would be, especially if Chris Paul's health ever wavered. Meanwhile, Philadelphia's numerous playoff collapses indicated that their roster might lack either the shooting or the chemistry to scale the highest peaks in the East. As the next few seasons wore on, each team's trajectory grew more complicated. Phoenix inexplicably crashed out of the 2022 playoffs in humiliating fashion against Dallas, sowing the first real doubts about a title-favored label. Meanwhile, the 76ers parted ways with Simmons after a bitter meltdown in the 2021 playoffs, shipping him for James Harden, a star with a notorious postseason track record of his own. Instead of brightening the future, these developments raised questions about whether either front office truly grasped how to build a championship team in today's NBA. Despite fundamental differences, the Suns rely heavily on perimeter scoring, while the Sixers revolve around a dominant center. Both organizations ended up under similar clouds of skepticism. Why? Because neither overcame the stumbling blocks that haunted them year after year. Phoenix couldn't stay healthy at the right times or patch holes in its bench. Philadelphia couldn't coax consistent second and third options to support Embiid when it mattered most. And while fans kept faith, the subsequent moves by these franchises would only intensify scrutiny. Many teams dream of courting a transcendent star, but the Suns took it a step further by stockpiling them. First came Chris Paul in 2020, a veteran presence who helped end the organization's decade-plus playoff drought. That stroke of genius paid quick dividends, culminating in a trip to the NBA Finals. Yet Phoenix's ownership and front office decided that wasn't enough. They believed they were one superstar away from capturing the elusive championship, a belief that pivoted into a blockbuster trade for Kevin Durant. Bringing Durant to the desert cost the Suns a king's ransom in young players like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, plus an array of draft picks extending deep into the future. Critics argued Phoenix had mortgaged too much and that an aging Durant was a risky bet given his injury history. The front office, however, insisted the combination of Booker's steady scoring and Durant's all-world talents would bulldoze any obstacles. A partial season with those two in the lineup fueled optimism, even if they ultimately stumbled in the playoffs. Then came another gamble, acquiring Bradley Beal from Washington. On paper, no defensive scheme can handle three prolific scorers at once. But in practice, problems mount quickly. The trio's staggering salary commitments thrust the Suns beyond the NBA's dreaded second apron, erasing flexibility. Depth became an afterthought as the roster filled out with minimum salary players. Worse yet, injuries continued to stalk Durant, while Beal wasn't exactly known for Iron Man reliability. A few months of inconsistent play were enough to raise alarm bells among fans who once salivated at the thought of unstoppable scoring barrages. One might imagine that a team paying a colossal luxury tax bill should dominate the league. Yet the Suns found themselves flirting with a .500 record, occasionally dipping into positions outside the playoff picture in an unforgiving Western Conference. Meanwhile, the front office watched in dismay as critics pointed to the limited supporting cast, questionable defensive capabilities, and uncertain durability among the star trio. If the plan was to win at all costs, no one told the basketball gods, who inflicted injuries and exposed glaring roster holes. The biggest dagger might be the draft situation. By trading a truckload of first-round picks, Phoenix essentially forfeited the ability to rebuild or even retool effectively if this star-laden approach failed. They are now left without meaningful control over their own destiny, especially if injuries keep piling up or the chemistry remains tepid. For a city that once brimmed with excitement when Booker hit his prime, this new reality feels unsettling. Yes, star power sells tickets and jerseys, but without the assurance of strong results, the entire project teeters on a precarious edge on the other side of the country. The Philadelphia 76ers embarked on a revolutionary strategy earlier in the decade by plunging into the process, sacrificing short-term competitiveness for the promise of future stardom. Joel Embiid arrived via the draft and slowly evolved from an injury-prone mystery into a generational big man with near-unparalleled footwork and scoring versatility. The city's faith in Sam Hinkie's radical vision seemed validated when Embiid blossomed into an MVP contender, fueling claims that Philly would soon dominate the Eastern Conference. But the process also produced heartbreak and tension. Markelle Fultz, selected first overall, never found his footing with the 76ers before being shipped elsewhere. Ben Simmons showcased all-defensive prowess and flashy playmaking but developed serious flaws in his offensive game, culminating in a playoff meltdown that all but ended his tenure in Philadelphia. When Simmons forced his way out, the team acquired James Harden, a dynamic scorer nearing the back end of his prime, still capable of brilliance, but saddled with a reputation for inconsistent postseason showings. The new Embiid-Harden tandem teased greatness, particularly during certain regular season stretches. Yet come playoff time, the 76ers again wilted in crucial moments, repeating a distressing pattern. The narrative that Embiid lacked the necessary support gained momentum. Some pointed fingers at Harden's inconsistency, while others questioned the coaching strategies of Doc Rivers, who was eventually dismissed. Joel Embiid, for all his personal success, remained ringless and now wore the frustration that inevitably collects when championship promises go unfulfilled. Philadelphia's front office, under Daryl Morey, juggled the goal of pleasing an MVP-caliber center with the reality that the window for contention might be narrower than expected. Harden's contract demands, plus the need to develop young talent like Tyrese Maxey, created a swirl of question marks about the team's future direction. Meanwhile, restless fans, having endured years of ghastly losing seasons, demanded more tangible results than second-round exits. The tension around the franchise rose further when rumors circulated that Harden wanted to depart once again, leaving Embiid's patience as a potential variable in the puzzle. In short, while the process was designed to produce a juggernaut, it instead gave birth to an emotionally charged, star-driven outfit that often fell short when the pressure peaked. Embiid's brilliance hasn't been enough to overcome rotating sidekicks and underperforming rosters. That's a painful reality for a fan base that heard for years, "Stay patient, greatness is coming." The question is whether management can recalibrate swiftly enough to build a truly lethal supporting cast before Embiid's prime years slip away. When teams repeatedly fail to meet playoff expectations, owners tend to reach for the most immediate fix, changing the head coach. Both Phoenix and Philadelphia executed significant bench boss swaps, each hoping a new perspective might transform the team's fortunes. For the Suns, the Monty Williams era ended rather suddenly. Williams, widely respected for uplifting a downtrodden squad into a finals contender, paid the price for their stumbles in the subsequent two postseasons. Phoenix opted to bring in Frank Vogel, a coach recognized for defensive acumen and championship experience with the Los Angeles Lakers. The hope was that Vogel could mold a star-laden team into a cohesive unit, tightening up their defense and perhaps offering a fresh approach to star management. Meanwhile, Philadelphia parted ways with Doc Rivers after yet another unceremonious playoff exit. Rivers, although a championship coach from his time in Boston, garnered criticism for failing to elevate a talented Sixers roster beyond the second round. The Sixers hierarchy pivoted to Nick Nurse, who famously guided the Toronto Raptors to their only NBA title. Nurse's arrival signals a more innovative offensive scheme and a willingness to embrace unique tactics, something that might amplify Embiid's skill set and push the team to a higher gear in critical moments. Yet the fundamental question remains: can a coach single-handedly mend rosters with inherent flaws and shaky chemistry? Vogel inherits a Suns locker room featuring multiple superstars, but minimal bench depth and a labyrinth of salary cap obstacles. Nurse steps into a Philadelphia environment under intense scrutiny, with James Harden publicly oscillating on his commitment and Embiid searching for the right supporting cast to alleviate double teams. Neither front office is offering these coaches a comfortable runway for experimentation. The pressure to deliver immediate results is nearly suffocating. Vogel and Nurse must contend not only with glaring on-court issues, but also with the psychological baggage accrued through repeated playoff disappointments. In Phoenix, that baggage stems from an all-or-nothing push that may have come too late. In Philadelphia, it's the weight of an entire city's emotional investment, anchored by a superstar center who refuses to be overshadowed. Fans and analysts alike scrutinize every substitution pattern, every post-game quote, hoping to glean signs of a changing culture. Are the Suns playing stronger team defense under Vogel? Is Nurse orchestrating creative sets that finally maximize the Sixers' star power? While coaching changes can reinvigorate a roster, no sideline leader can outrun the fundamental reality that championship success requires more than fresh voices in the locker room. Time will reveal whether these hires can truly unlock a new phase of success, or merely serve as scapegoats when deeper structural problems persist. For more than a decade, NBA franchises clung to the notion that combining three elite stars all but guaranteed a trophy. The Phoenix Suns appear to have taken that blueprint to heart. With Kevin Durant's exceptional scoring prowess, Devin Booker's lethal jump shot, and Bradley Beal's proven marksmanship, the team aims to terrorize defenses nightly. The logic is straightforward. Any one of these players can drop 30 points on a given evening. So how could an opponent handle all three? However, the modern league has evolved. Depth, versatility, and continuity often trump star power alone. Squads like the Denver Nuggets and the Milwaukee Bucks cultivated rosters that include not only marquee talents, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, but also robust, supporting casts capable of stepping up in the playoffs. By contrast, Phoenix assembled a top-heavy group that struggles whenever one star is sidelined or even slightly off his game. Meanwhile, injuries have already cost key floor time for both Durant and Beal, exposing the limitations of the players behind them. Plenty of fans might argue that three unstoppable scorers can compensate for any weaknesses. There's a kernel of truth there if everyone is healthy and aligned, but the scoreboard doesn't always favor isolation-heavy offense, especially when opponents can exploit miscommunications on defense or feast on an undersized bench. The Suns also surrendered valuable two-way contributors, like Mikal Bridges, in their pursuit of glitzier names, leaving them short on defenders who can lock down wings or bigs. Money complicates matters further. With so many max-level contracts, Phoenix is pinned into the second apron, sacrificing mid-level exceptions and other tools that might have shored up the roster's depth. This self-imposed handicap means that if the core underperforms, there's no quick fix waiting in the form of a savvy trade or a free agent signing. Each misstep becomes magnified, each lineup experiment is more urgent, and each minor injury to the big three can derail crucial momentum. What's more, the social dynamics of star-laden teams can't be ignored. Will Booker remain content if he's overshadowed by Durant's scoring surges? Will Beal bristle if he's relegated to a pure spot-up shooter role? Ambitions and egos can clash in ways that disrupt even the most talented squads, especially when adversity hits. Right now, the Suns are clinging to the hope that skill alone will drown out concerns about cohesion. But unless they demonstrate a resilient team identity, questions about their viability as a title contender will grow louder. Across the league, Joel Embiid stands as a colossus, an MVP-level centerpiece with a mesmerizing blend of power, finesse, and range. Defenses quake when he rumbles down the paint or steps outside for a smooth jumper. Yet the 76ers' entire offensive system orbits around Embiid's gravitational pull. That fundamental truth imposes its own set of challenges, especially in an era increasingly dominated by swift ball handlers and wing dynamos. Any star, no matter how commanding, needs consistent help to thrive in the postseason. For a while, Philadelphia hoped Ben Simmons could be the perfect complement, providing defensive brilliance and open-court prowess. But Simmons' refusal to shoot outside or even challenge defenders in half-court sets eventually created spacing nightmares, culminating in the tension that led to his exit. When James Harden arrived, the narrative shifted. He and Embiid formed a dynamic inside-out duo that could overpower almost anyone on a given night. However, the synergy never fully cemented. Harden's trademark isolation style sometimes clashed with Embiid's back-to-the-basket approach, leaving the offense stagnant when one star dribbled excessively. Tyrese Maxey emerged as a bright spot, injecting energy and fearless shot-making, but at times he looked more like a spark plug than a second star. Role players, such as Tobias Harris, displayed promise but rarely delivered during the do-or-die moments. Meanwhile, the team's perimeter defense faltered whenever Embiid had to overextend himself as a rim protector. Opponents exploited these vulnerabilities in the postseason, snuffing out the Sixers in heartbreakingly familiar fashion. The front office continues to experiment, hoping new strategies and fresh role players can optimize Embiid's talents. But the fundamental question remains: can a post-centric offense win championships in a league that revolves around quick, versatile wings and unstoppable pick-and-roll combos? Embiid's skill set is so comprehensive that he could theoretically anchor a title run, yet the supporting cast always seems to lack that intangible synergy. And with every season that ends in a second-round exit or earlier, the rumblings about whether Embiid might eventually request a move grow louder. Fans ache for him to succeed, recognizing that the big man's passion and skill are generational. On the flip side, some worry that injuries, like the persistent knee problems, could limit his window of absolute dominance. If the 76ers don't find the secret formula soon, they could squander a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, leaving both the player and the franchise forever wondering what might have been if they had just found the perfect puzzle pieces. Loyalty runs deep in both Phoenix and Philadelphia, where fan bases have endured years of disappointment interspersed with glimmers of hope. The sense of resentment swells when teams that appear loaded with talent fail to deliver. Local sports radio shows in each city echo with frustration. Why can't these rosters perform at the level their star power promises? In Phoenix, the abrupt changes in ownership and front office strategies sow additional confusion. Matt Ishbia's aggressive approach signals an all-or-nothing gamble, yet the on-court product doesn't look like a juggernaut. Fans hear rumors of locker room discontent and wonder if the stars are truly in sync or merely biding time until the situation combusts. Over in Philadelphia, faithful followers remember the vow that dark days would yield future glory. They now see an MVP anchoring their squad, but also a revolving door of supporting players who can't seem to push them over the championship hurdle. Amid the swirl of social media speculation, rumored trades swirl perpetually. Some propose that the Suns may eventually dangle Durant or Booker to salvage long-term viability. Others claim the 76ers could consider dealing Harden again if the tension remains, or even contemplate the unthinkable, trading Embiid, if another disappointing playoff exit befalls them. Although such moves sound drastic, the intensity of fan ire and the short patience of modern franchises can make previously unthinkable deals become plausible overnight. Sports media outlets thrive on these storylines, churning out daily updates that feed into the uneasy energy enveloping both organizations. One day, an anonymous source claims the Suns trio rarely sees eye to eye. The next, a rumor arises that Embiid might quietly weigh his options if he senses a dead end in Philadelphia. While some of this chatter is undoubtedly overblown, it shapes public perception and can affect internal morale. Players and coaches must constantly deflect questions about hypothetical scenarios or perceived friction. The discontent ripples beyond the local fanatics. League-wide, there's a sense of astonishment that teams with so many marquee names can't seize control of their conferences. Rivals sense vulnerability and circle matchups with the Suns or 76ers, knowing that if the pressure intensifies, either squad could unravel. Meanwhile, owners in smaller markets watch these sagas unfold, happy to see that super teams aren't guaranteed success. Even if both front offices publicly deny exploring major trades, the speculation won't subside. These rosters are too expensive, too star-laden, and too precarious to ignore radical solutions. For Phoenix, the harsh financial reality of the second apron looms over every decision. If the Suns can't accumulate enough wins to justify their colossal spending, the notion of trading away Kevin Durant or Devin Booker becomes a hot topic. Durant remains an attractive asset for contenders seeking a lethal closer, albeit with durability concerns. Booker, younger and locked into a long-term contract, could command an even bigger haul of picks and prospects. The same logic applies to Bradley Beal, although his no-trade clause complicates matters significantly. On the flip side, the 76ers wrestle with the conundrum of James Harden's wandering eyes and the possibility that Joel Embiid might grow weary of partial solutions. Harden's trade value is in flux due to his age and contract preferences, yet some squads might still gamble on his scoring ability. A more nuclear scenario would involve Embiid himself. While shipping an MVP-level center might sound ludicrous, we've witnessed numerous NBA stars force exits from seemingly stable situations. If Embiid ever gave management an ultimatum, or the franchise decided it couldn't build a champion around him, a massive trade could follow. The bounty of assets from such a deal would be staggering. These prospective deals often link back to teams with stockpiled picks, such as the Houston Rockets, in the Suns' case, or the Oklahoma City Thunder, in general, though not specifically rumored for Embiid. The entire league stands at attention when an elite talent becomes available, so either Phoenix or Philadelphia could ignite a bidding war if they decide to blow it all up. The question is whether ownership in either city has the stomach to endure a lengthy rebuild, especially after funneling so many resources into chasing a title. Of course, a mid-season pivot to a full-scale teardown risks alienating fans who paid steep ticket prices and endured years of heartbreak. But remaining in limbo is equally unappealing. If a roster is stuck in the dreaded middle, too talented to draft a future star, yet not cohesive enough to claim a trophy, eventually a large-scale reset might be the only way out. Whether that moment is imminent or a distant last resort remains to be seen. Doom and gloom narratives can overlook the fact that both the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers harbor genuine potential to reverse their fortunes. In the NBA, a single trade or a sudden burst of health for key players can transform a season from catastrophic to triumphant. Moreover, each organization possesses a foundation that, if nurtured properly, could still bear championship fruit. Let's start with Phoenix. Devin Booker stands as a potent anchor on offense, and while Kevin Durant's availability is always a concern, his skill set remains lethal whenever he suits up. If Bradley Beal finds a rhythm within a cohesive offensive scheme, the Suns have enough scoring firepower to topple any team on a given night. Frank Vogel's defensive expertise might eventually mold role players like Josh Okogie or Jusuf Nurkic into essential cogs, rounding out the rotation. An improbable run isn't impossible if the stars align and no more critical injuries occur. Phoenix could still live up to its hype, leaving early stumbles as a distant memory. Philadelphia, meanwhile, boasts the reigning league MVP in Joel Embiid, whose presence alone can dominate a playoff series. If Nick Nurse's ingenuity unlocks synergy between Embiid, Harden, assuming he stays, and Tyrese Maxey, the Sixers might finally harness an offensive identity that thrives under postseason pressure. The pieces are there: shooters who can space the floor, defenders who can hustle, and a big man who draws double teams like few others. It's plausible that an intangible shift, maybe a newly discovered chemistry or a motivational spark, propels Philadelphia to the top of the East. Furthermore, each franchise has an avenue to reclaim or accumulate future draft assets if they must pivot. Phoenix could engage Houston to retrieve some of its own picks, clearing the path for a rebuild that yields fresh talent. The 76ers might flip an unhappy star for promising young players who can complement Embiid or serve as a bridge if the big man eventually departs. In a league driven by flexibility, no predicament is permanent, so long as creative GMs remain proactive and owners commit to a coherent vision. Skeptics will argue these scenarios are too idealistic. Injuries, personality conflicts, and the brutal nature of the NBA's top contenders could crush such optimism. Nonetheless, the fuse of potential remains lit. Each team holds enough star power to engineer a remarkable surge. Whether either group can fuse that potential into a legitimate championship push depends on intangible factors: leadership, resilience, and the capacity to forge unity under intense pressure. If they fail, the fallback plan may well be to tear it down and start anew. In many ways, the Suns and the Sixers serve as mirrors, reflecting a truth about the NBA's glamorized star culture. Hype doesn't guarantee hardware. Both teams are currently performing a high-wire act, balancing monstrous expectations with glaring vulnerabilities. Both have rosters that scream title aspirations, and yet, in practice, demonstrate the precariousness of leaning too heavily on star power without the supporting architecture of role players, defensive cohesion, and draft flexibility. For Phoenix, the future hinges on whether the Durant-Booker-Beal trio can remain on the court long enough to mesh, and whether Frank Vogel can institute the defensive tenacity required to supplement their scoring. If they succeed, the narrative shifts dramatically. Fans will declare the high-priced experiment a success, overshadowing early struggles. Failure, however, might trigger irreversible damage, leading to trades that send the franchise tumbling back to square one. Philadelphia faces a separate but equally fraught dilemma. Joel Embiid is in his prime, longing for a ring to validate his greatness. James Harden, by nature, is an unpredictable figure with the history of restlessness. Tyrese Maxey's growth is a bright spot, but a single promising young guard can't transform an entire franchise on his own. Nick Nurse's reputation for innovation could transform the Sixers' game plan, but if it doesn't produce postseason dividends, the city's notoriously passionate supporters might lose patience, and the voices calling for radical changes could become deafening. Both clubs arrived at this juncture by chasing big dreams and using bold strategies. Some of those gambles made sense at the time. You don't often get the chance to land a Durant or expedite a rebuild around a generational center like Embiid. But as the dust settles, fans realize that the margin for error in constructing a championship roster is razor thin. Depth, culture, and adaptability often trump star wattage, especially when the brightest stars carry major injury baggage or complicated personalities. No matter which path each team chooses, doubling down, or initiating sweeping trades. The league will watch closely. The collapses or triumphs of the Suns and Sixers have ripple effects that shape how other organizations approach team building. Their experiences will inform whether future GMs go all in on pricey superstar clusters or prefer a more balanced approach to sustaining excellence over time. As the drama continues to unfold, the rest of us are left to observe whether these once majestic rosters can claw their way back to legitimacy or whether we'll witness a cataclysmic finale that reshapes them entirely. In an era when superstars roam from team to team in search of titles, few narratives reveal the fragility of big bets as starkly as those of the Phoenix Suns and Philadelphia 76ers. Both franchises teased fans with visions of grandeur. Suns faithful expected unstoppable offensive barrages, and Sixers supporters trusted the process would culminate in a trophy. Instead, each finds itself perched on a precipice, wrestling with unresolved questions about health, chemistry, leadership, and future direction. Will the Suns salvage their star-laden experiment by forging an unstoppable scoring machine and shoring up defensive gaps? Or will they ultimately pay the steepest price for ignoring depth in favor of big names, prompting a fire sale that recoups draft assets? Can the 76ers, under Nick Nurse, channel Embiid's transcendent talents into a championship run before frustration and age take their toll? Or might we soon witness an even more shocking shift, like shipping out their franchise center if he grows weary of postseason letdowns? Neither answer is certain, and therein lies the fascination. Each possession, each minor ankle tweak, each testy exchange between player and coach could tilt the balance. The stakes are enormous: entire career legacies, tens of millions in luxury taxes, and the loyalty of fan bases that have endured years of waiting for their parade day. In this highly pressurized environment, success might validate every controversial decision, while failure could condemn the franchises to an extended rebuilding purgatory. What happens next won't just determine the fates of two proud NBA cities. It could reset assumptions around how super teams are constructed and whether the big market, star-chasing formula still holds. So keep an eye on the Valley of the Sun and the City of Brotherly Love, because the next moves these organizations make, whether bold or desperate, are bound to reverberate across the league. Their ultimate direction might answer the most pressing question in basketball today. Is top-heavy star power still the surest path to a championship, or has the modern NBA evolved beyond that one certain ideal? One thing's for sure: these squads can't stay in limbo forever. If major breakthroughs don't come soon, major shakeups almost certainly will. Fans on both coasts brace themselves for whatever drama emerges next. It could be uplifting redemption, or the final nail in the coffin of two of the most perplexing, high-expectation teams of this generation.